So, listen, very critical when we need to be of the Democratic Party, which is usually every day. But President Biden, a major credit to him. Biden announces pardons for thousands convicted of federal marijuana possession. Reading from ABC News. President Joe Biden on Thursday announced he's pardoning all Americans who've been convicted of simple marijuana possession under federal law, coming closer to keeping a 2020 campaign promise, one of the few that he's kept, to decriminalize the drug a little more than a month before the midterm election. The executive action will benefit 6,500 people with prior federal convictions and thousands of others charged under the District of Columbia's criminal code, according to senior administration officials. This is what he tweeted, quote, "As I said when I ran for president, no one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana." Biden tweeted, "It's legal in many states, and criminal records for marijuana possession have led to needless barriers to employment, housing, and educational opportunities. And that's before you address the racial disparities around who suffers the consequences. While whites and black and brown people use marijuana at similar rates, black and brown people are arrested, prosecuted, and convicted at disproportional rates." So, it doesn't sound like a lot, 6,500, but it's a lot of people if it's kind of screwed up your present and future. Not to mention part of what he's doing is, let me just go to the actual tweet. If you could pull that up. This is the third tweet, Colin. Second, I'm calling on governors to pardon simple state marijuana possession offenses, just as no one should be in federal prison solely for possessing marijuana. No one should be in local jail or state prison for that reason either. Third, we classify marijuana at the same level as heroin and more seriously than fentanyl. It makes no sense. I'm asking Secretary Becerra and the Attorney General to initiate the process of reviewing how marijuana is scheduled under federal law. That's the part I don't really. This is like, well, let's create a committee to study.
They should just reschedule it. Honestly, they should just decriminalize all of it, in my opinion. But
we don't need a process to review. I mean,
no, we already know the war on drugs has failed miserably. It hasn't lowered the rates of drug usage. All it's done is put bodies in prison, created a black market, created an arms race between law enforcement and traffickers that has resulted in unbelievable amounts of violence, and people continue to use drugs. It has not abated that in any way, shape, or form. It's an absolute failure.
Absolutely. So he said, "I'd also like to note that as federal and state regulations change, we still need important limitations on trafficking, marketing, and underage sales of marijuana." I don't really get the trafficking part. I mean,
I don't need to legalize it. I don't even think we should go beyond decriminalizing pot. It should just be legalized.
We traffic alcohol. Anyway, but I mean, this is Crime Bill Joe, so I'll take a victory.
I agree.
And by the way, the crime bill and, the war on crime and the crime bill, tough on crime things did affect people. People were put in prison for marijuana too.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in
especially
some ways,
if you're in a state that has like a third strike policy like we had for decades here in California.
Right. So in some ways, he's righting some wrongs that he helped usher in. But either way, it is a win. I feel this whole study thing, let's study the process. Listen, if Republicans retake the House, possibly the Senate.
That's the end of that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that moving it from Schedule 1.
Jordan, follow me on this. I would say Republicans use drugs at the same rate that anybody on the left does. So you would think that there'd be some pressure coming from their voters, but I don't know.
Exactly. So I think this is a great thing. Personally, I mean, I've smoked weed in my life. I'm not like an avid smoker, but it just never made any sense. It's a plant. I still don't know anyone who's ever overdosed on marijuana. I don't think that's a thing.
I don't think that's a thing.
And the reality is, and there's been research and studies about this, the reason that they have kept marijuana as a criminalized marijuana is because in many ways, marijuana would be a really serious competitor to big pharma. I mean, I think
that's true.
It's not a cure-all for every ill. But marijuana is very, very helpful for a lot of things that big pharma makes a lot of money off of, whether depression, anxiety, muscle pain, stomach problems. One of my brother's best friends had Crohn's disease, and marijuana was basically his, life-saving medicine.
Cancer patients.
Yeah.
I would say it was originally criminalized, though, for different reasons. I think that's what's perpetuating it in the realm of staying criminalized. But I think, follow me on this, I'd be curious if you agree with this. I think part and parcel to why it became criminalized was because it was part of the counterculture. It was Nixon that began this war on drugs, and they wanted to crack down on the anti-war movement, the civil rights movement, all of these sort of, quote unquote, counterculture movements born of that period. Mm-hmm. And drugs were associated with that. So I think that they found the use of marijuana to be threatening in that way because it was anti-establishment.
Yeah, absolutely. And listen, the capitalist class, they don't want the people high all the time and happy. We need you working. We need you miserable. We need you desolate, not, and, obviously that's a caricature. Not everyone who smokes pot is like super high. Some people, it just gives you like an even keel, whatever. But I think it's a great thing. And by the way, on the politics, it kind of looks like John Fetterman had a big part of this. If you could show the tweet, John Fetterman tweeted, "We did it, Joe." And why that is important is because when Biden was coming to an event for Fetterman, I think it was last month, Fetterman put out like a press release basically calling on him to decriminalize marijuana. And that was kind of bold because Biden was coming to speak for him. And Fetterman called him out, diplomatically. But it's time for the president to do, the obvious. So Holly Otterbein with, I think, Politico, she tweeted, "John Fetterman got a heads up today from the White House that Biden was going to pardon marijuana offenses and review how it's scheduled. A person familiar tells me Fetterman talked with Biden for 20 minutes last month in Pittsburgh, where Fetterman urged him to deschedule pot." So it's not like John Fetterman was the first person to probably tell Joe Biden to do this, but maybe he made a convincing political argument. I don't think Biden...
It's possible.
Yeah, I don't think Biden has any core ideology that he thinks marijuana is... I think Biden just... throughout his career has kind of gone as the wind goes. And hey, between the student...
Yeah, true. But let's talk about the Obama administration. He was prosecuting federal drug charges even after California legalized it in the state. So there's always been that tension.
Absolutely. I just want to show the numbers. And this is from a decade ago, so it's probably worse. This is from the ACLU. Marijuana arrests by the number. Half of drug busts are for pot. Most of the people police are arresting are not drug kingpins, but rather people with small amounts of pot.
Right.
52% of all drug arrests in 2010 were for marijuana. My guess is it's about the same, if not more now. According to the ACL's original analysis, marijuana arrests now account for over half of all drug arrests in the U.S. Of the 8.2 million marijuana arrests between 2001 and 2010, 88% were for simply having marijuana. Nationwide, the arrest data...
88%. Wow.
Nationwide, the arrest data revealed one consistent trend: significant racial bias. Despite roughly equal usage rates, blacks are 3.73 times more likely than whites to be arrested for marijuana. And this was, I think, numbers a decade ago. So take that for what it's worth.
It's probably similar now. It sounds about like on par.
But, I'll credit Joe Biden where we should credit him. I mean,
this was a good move. It's a step in the right direction. Absolutely.
Right. But, the proof will be in the pudding. We need to see, people need to stay on him because they, calling
we don't need
for
a study. We needed to just to schedule it, like you said.
Yeah, calling for the director of health and hospital, the health department, Javier Becerra, to schedule it. Well, that sounds like we're going to schedule it like we're going to raise the minimum wage, in the year 21, 22. We need, activists need to stay on him. And the other thing is, maybe Fetterman made the case because profit is all they care about. Hey, this is one step to legalizing it. Hey, there's a lot of states and local municipalities that are hurting financially.
Right.
This is one step to legalizing it, and that would be a major taxable source of income. It's a huge
tax boom. Yeah, I mean, it did wonders in the state of California.
Yeah, so they might be looking at it like that. The same way that, these fossil fuckers, people have been lobbying them, showing them you could actually make equal, if not more, on renewables and wind. So sometimes with the plutocrats and the bourgeoisie, a moral argument is not going to help them.
No, an economic one might, though.
An
Yeah,
economic
I agree.
one might.